start this. And I shut it off. So, we will pray at the end. So, if you think of any requests, that I feel like we've prayed over everything. So, but Daniel covers 440 years of future history. But this book is broken into two halves, and tonight we're going to look at chapters 1 through 6. And so we'll wait for Celia. And I'm going to put a chair right here.
It is Cecilia.
Celia, I got one more chair over here for you. Okay. 7 to 12, 1 to 6 chapters are the miracles and the stories we know, and 7 to 12 are prophecies. Chapters 1 to 6 are written in the third person. These aren't anything you just have to write down, but just kind of interesting. So Daniel's written in the third person. I don't think I ever realized that.
Oh, it is.
1 to 6 is written all in the third person. So it's all he. In 7 to 12, it's written as I. He's talking as I. So 1 to 6 is written about things that happened during his life, so it's the present. 7 through 12 is what's happened after Daniel's life, so it's the future. So chapters 1 is written in Hebrew. Okay? Now I'll explain why. 2 through 6 is Aramaic. And I'll explain what that is. 7 is Hebrew again. And 8 through 12 is Aramaic. Aramaic is like the language that everybody, like if you travel anywhere in the world right now, you can pretty much speak English. Everybody's going to speak English because everybody knows I got to know English because it's just the language that everybody needs to know. We're the only ones that all speak English because we're kind of, not so smart as other countries. Hebrew was a very specific language for the Jewish people. So chapters 1 is written mainly for the Jewish people, the Israelites, okay? 2 through 6 is written for basically the unsaved or the Gentiles, okay? 7 is back written for the Jews. No, I got that wrong. Do I have that wrong?
No, 8 through 12.
Yep. This is 8 through 12 is the Hebrew. Yep. So, no. Let's see. 2 through 7. 2 through 7. This is what I got wrong.
Study Bible.
2 through 7 is Aramaic.
It's going to bring a different one and I practice.
Here we go. Now that I've messed you all up, if you were writing.
So was the Aramaic language, or is it the Aramaic?
This is what they spoke in Babylon.
Okay, so that was the language of the land.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So 8 through 12 was back to the Jewish people. So it's written to the Jews. But it's really kind of written to us too. But
Yeah.
Daniel didn't know we were coming along. So even though it was 1 through 6 and 7 through 12, that chapter there, 7 goes to the Aramaic, and then the 1 is through the Hebrew. So, just kind of interesting. Let's just jump right in, and you will kind of see this where it says in chapter 1, where it says, am I in 1? Yes. It says it right where it comes in as Aramaic. No, that's in chapter 2. Forget I'm saying that. So, but anyway, so Daniel 1, some of this, you're going to be like, I know the stories, but I'm hoping that some of these are like, oh, I didn't remember that about the story. So this is in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim. So if you even take your sheet here, we can kind of look and see where we begin and where we end in this whole book. So we're at the bottom of the first page. First page is 1020. So at the bottom, it's 605 BC. That's where we're at, okay? This is where we're starting. And we're going to go all the way, this book is going to go all the way down to 537 BC. That's a lot.
Do you have more of them?
Oh, yes, yes. Anybody else need one?
Thank you.
So you're starting in here, okay? So when I looked at that, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. The book covers a lot of time. So anyway, so let's look at this. The Israelites were taken in 3 lots, okay, 3 different times. And if you look at that, it says in 605, it's really 606. I'll listen to one, book, and it'll say 605, one will say 606. So just give me a break. It's somewhere in there, okay? So somewhere in there, 605, 606, King Nebuchadnezzar secures the conquest of Assyria up over here, okay? So he's in Babylon. He takes over and gets Assyria. So then he takes over, comes to Jerusalem. He goes to the royalty people, and he picks the best guys in the royalty. So you'll see that it says in verse 4, 1 through 4, it says, he went to the royal family and the nobility, and he looked for young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. So basically, think of them as they were homeschooled in extreme Christian homeschool kids, okay? Just think of it like that. That very strict. Mom and dads were very strict. And now they're put into the University of Babylon. Very pagan, okay? So just think of that difference. They're not prisoners like we think of prisoners of war, but they can't go back. I mean, they're but they're not like prisoners like we think of prisoners. Like they're not tied up and chained up, don't have a ball and chain, but they are now there to learn. They're going to basically to school. They've got to learn how to be Babylonians. Okay, so they're going to the University of Babylonian, and they're going to learn all these things. Now the king has assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table, and so Daniel says no. But let's go back to who's with him, who we know. So some of them that were with him is Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now we know them as, they gave Daniel the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego is how you really say it. Now they gave them those names because they're trying to get them to forget who they were. Okay? I want you to forget that you are Jewish people. We want to make you become Babylonians. Okay? So now Daniel and the 3 guys, they resolve they're not going to eat this. They're not going to eat this food. Why not? Have you ever thought about why they are not going to eat this? Well, first of all, they're wanting to fatten the boys up, but they didn't want to eat it because this food is very contaminated in their eyes, okay? Because the first portion of all that food was offered to idols, okay? And also, a portion of the wine was poured out on a pagan altar. So remember how we talked last week about Ezekiel, and God said, I want you to lay on your side, and I want you to have this food, and you're going to prepare it over your own poop. Remember we talked about that? And he said, God, I can't do this. Because that I have never defiled my body. You told me never to do anything like that. And so he actually talked God out of it, and God finally said, okay, you can cook it over cow dung. And so, because having it over cow dung was not defiled from what all the things in Leviticus, okay? So see why these guys, this would be so defiling for them to come and eat food that was already offered to some pagan idols. See, does this now make sense? I didn't learn this in Sunday school. Nobody taught me this part. Okay, so this was like, okay, now this makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. So these animals were ceremonially unclean, and nothing was prepared according to the regulations of the law. They didn't want to defile themselves. So now I think about, my mind says, wow, you guys had good parents. Somewhere along the line, you guys were really taught well, and you are sticking to the teachings that either you had really good preachers, either good Sunday school teachers, good parents, somehow this really got into you. I love that. This is how our kids should be, you know, the people we teach in our churches. Yes.
Isn't it too that the Jewish people would refrain from certain foods because of
They were supposed
their
to.
law?
Yes, but remember, who are we looking at? We're looking at second and third generation Israelites, and all they do is disobey. Constantly. How many prophets have already come and said, you're disobeying, you're not honoring your God, yada, yada, yada. So here now we've got these guys that are being so particular. This is what it is like, just really impressing me that, wow, we've got these guys that are really wanting to.
It's amazing.
And they stay strong.
And they stay strong.
Yeah.
And so here we have all these guys look the same. They don't have 3 heads. They don't have, eyes on their arms. What's the difference? The only difference is the attitude. And they don't have a bad attitude when the officials come and say, you have to eat this food. They don't, they don't get all puffed up and say, I'm not eating that food. Daniel brings another alternative. He says, listen, where is it? He says at the end of 12, verse 12. Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this, the other guy, and he tested them for 10 days. So see, he didn't come with a bad attitude. He came with an alternative. And he said, test us, and I bet he did it with a smile on his face too, This is the difference, that these guys came with the right attitude. This is what needs to differentiate us with the world, because we look the same as the world. But the difference has to be our attitude. Our attitude has to be different. And so I think that's the one thing we can take from this and learn from Daniel. Also that they were given a small task and they passed it with flying colors. Now God knows he's got some big tasks for them down the road, and that they can pass that. They were 10 times better in their studies than the others were. So in the University of Babylon, they were just that much stronger, because in verse 17, what does it say? Read that and tell me, why were they smarter? It's very easy. Verse 17. God gave them knowledge and understanding. Yep.
Knowledge and understanding.
Yep. So does that mean we can ask for that?
Absolutely.
That's right, we can. Okay, that's chapter 1. Chapter 2. King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. You ever had a dream and you get up in the next morning that bothers you, but you have no idea what you dreamed about?
Yeah.
That's what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. I always thought that he had a dream and he wanted all his wise men to guess what his dream was. he didn't remember his dream. He did not remember his dream, and he said, you guys, you got to tell me what my dream was, because it's really bothering me what it was. I know it was bad, and I need somebody to tell me what it was. So they're like, we can't do that. I mean, you're asking for the impossible. Nobody but the gods, and the gods aren't living with us. So there's nobody who can do it. So he got, in 12, it says, this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men. Now notice it says wise men, okay? Because my writers that I've been reading said they really believe, because I told you the Israelites were taken in 3 different lots in 3 different years. They came out in 3 different lots, but their lots, all of them didn't come out. A lot of the Israelites stayed in Babylon, okay? So they really think, and I never thought about this, that the wise men, when Jesus was born, saw the star, that those were wise men that were Israelites living in Babylon, and they're the ones that saw the star. Yeah. So, and then it calls them wise men. So no wonder we're saying the wise men came. So, yeah, so another little tidbit that was fun to learn. So, okay, so he has that dream, and so Daniel says, so he sees in 14, Arioch, boy, all these names, aren't they fun? When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, he's going out because the king Nebuchadnezzar said, go out, kill them all, because they can't figure out what my dream is. So he was ordered to go kill all these guys. I don't know why Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego hadn't been told what was going on. So this is the first time they hear about the fact that there's a dream that they're supposed to interpret. And so as he's walking out, Daniel says, what's going on? And he says, well, I got to kill everybody that's, supposed to be able to interpret dreams. And Daniel says, well, hang on a bit. Can you wait 24 hours? Let me go home and talk to my God and find out. So Arioch gives him that chance. So Daniel goes back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and says, hey, all right, we got to go have our prayer meeting tonight. And we got to ask God to give us the revelation of what in the world this dream was. So they do that. And in the night, sure enough, that's what God does. He tells exactly to Daniel what the dream is. And so, because in verse 19, it says, during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, and then he gives them the prayer there in 20 through 23. So in 24, Daniel goes back to Arioch and says, hey, I've got the dream. God, my God, I don't know it, but my God. See, he always is throwing the praise back to God. He never takes it on himself, but he always says, and Belshazzar is what they all call him. Okay, Daniel's name is Belshazzar with a T. Okay, I want you to notice that because there's a reason why. So Daniel replied, said, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery. But verse 28, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. So he goes before King Nebuchadnezzar, and he tells him, this is what your dream's in. So verse 29, read along with me. As you were lying there, O king, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than other living men, but so that you, O king, may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out not by human hands. Okay, this is an important part. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, and the bronze, and the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. Threshing floor, remember, is when it's blown away into the wind, okay? So always remember that a threshing floor is just everything is chopped up to bits and just flown into the wind. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Okay, we're going to learn what all that means. So this was the dream. I did my best at creating this guy. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't draw a mouse, so I gave him a big beard. So, the head is the Babylonian Empire. Nebu is Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so that was made of gold. Okay, meaning he is the most powerful empire that's going to have been. Okay, the next is the silver, the chest, is the Medo-Persian Empire. King Cyrus, he's going to be part of this. He's the head of Medo. He's the king of Medo, which I didn't take the time. Does anybody know what Medo is? The Medes and the Persians. I don't know because Medes is not like a country. I don't know. Persia, of course, is Iraq, I meant. King Darius. So that's the silver. Silver is not as great as gold, correct? Okay, so they are not going to be as powerful as the Babylonian Empire. Next comes along the bronze, which is the thighs, right here. The legs, he calls it something. Belly and thighs. That's the Grecian Empire, and that is Alexander the Great. Do you remember learning about Alexander the Great in school? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he only lived till, was it 20 or 30? But he just charged through everything. He was really quite the guy. And so we're going to learn that when he died so young, he had such a huge area, and that four of his generals got 4 different parts of the country, and one from the north and one from the south, became real agitators to Israel. That we will learn later. Then the iron and the clay, the legs and the feet, it became the Roman Empire, who is Julius Caesar. Now, this is where it comes into what time period? What do you think? Think about this. Babylon, and then the empire, and then the Greeks. Now, what's going on in the Roman Empire? Where are we in the Bible?
Like end times or?
No.
No, we were Jesus, aren't we?
Yes. Who's king? When Julius Caesar? Remember Jesus said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's." Mm-hmm. So Julius Caesar's in power.
Jesus.
Yeah. So this is in the New Testament. This is in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay. So isn't that interesting? Okay. So let's go back to this. Now, just think about the next kingdom after the Roman Empire. Now let's look at this again. A rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, and the silver and gold were broken to pieces at the same time. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Do you get the picture? Are you there with me? Do I need to explain it? Yes, no? That's Jesus, okay? That's his kingdom. His kingdom struck all the earthly kingdoms down. It filled the whole earth. His kingdom is through the whole thing. And see, this was written way, way back in Daniel. Daniel doesn't understand any of this stuff. He doesn't understand Jesus and the Messiah. And here, I just love that. I mean, it's the rock. And don't we call him the rock? You know, I love that. You're watching a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. I'm gonna read again because I want you to get it. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet by iron and clay and smashed them. So, in other words, it smashed the Roman Empire. Okay? It swept it away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. So down in 39, it says, after you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. So this is where then he's kind of telling this that I already told you. Next, a third kingdom, one out of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. And so as you read on, but in verse 45 is where what I kind of just said. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and the interpretation is trustworthy. So King Nebuchadnezzar just falls on his feet. He's just unbelievable, enthralled with Daniel and what he has said, and he's just very happy. And he makes him ruler of the entire province of Babylon and placed him over all its wise men. And then he even made Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administration over the province of Babylon. And Daniel becomes so great that he lives and reigns through this and however long he's still living. Okay, 80 years. He never goes back, even though he has a chance to go back to Israel. He never goes back because he's in such power and he's such a great and mighty ruler here. So, very interesting. He had the chance to go back and doesn't. Okay, I hope you learned something you didn't know out of that story, because I learned some things. Maybe it was just for me. Yes?
So was he ruling according to their laws and ruling, or was he trying to bring in the Hebrew?
No, he was ruling theirs.
Oh.
Yeah, But the story's not over, so story's not over. So, but also, this was God's first warning that God was in control of kings and kingdoms. That history, I want to write this down. That history, I want to write it in a different color. God was saying that history was his story. I love that.
Think of that scripture, and I still can't get my mind around that. And it says in the New Testament, and the government shall be upon his shoulders.
That's for me.
I still can't understand.
Yeah, I don't
scripture.
think I get the government and shoulders. We should do a little study on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I haven't taken the time to really study that, and
It makes
it's
me think of that.
yeah. But yeah, history is his story.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it is his story. Okay, so chapter 3 is the story of the fiery furnace. And so we all know that story, but hopefully there's something we can learn out of this one too. So I really think that this whole thing, I think his whole idea of this said, you know what, I need to make a big thing about me full of gold. And that's just what he did. So remember, the Babylonian area is flatter than a pancake, okay? So he decides to build or to erect a statue of himself made of gold, and it's 90 feet tall. Is that what
9 feet.
No, it's much taller.
90
Yeah,
90 feet and 9 feet wide.
yeah, 9 feet wide. What verse is that in?
One.
Three.
Oh. If they would put it in numbers and not in words, letters, I would,
Oh,
okay.
90 feet high.
90 feet high,
90 feet
yep.
wide. Okay, I didn't read it all.
Yep. So he brought everybody together. And so satraps are the high officials, okay? Because I had to look up that. Because what is a satrap? So everybody that was anybody plus the nobodies had to come and worship that statue, okay? But I really think this is where, don't you agree? This is where he got the idea from. I mean, if he saw that and said, "Hey, I'm the head made of gold. I'm gonna make the whole thing of made of gold." I mean, he's a narcissist, right? So, and he said, "I'm gonna make it even bigger than I imagined in my dream." So he does this, and I'm kind of just having to laugh about Trump and Elon right now. I'm like, you two babies, you just need to, I don't know what these two are pulling, but I'm like, you guys got to grow up. And so, men, I don't think ever grow up. I'm just not sure if they really ever do. Do you all agree to that? They're always little boys at heart. So that's kind of what I feel like goes on in this chapter, because there's guys jealous. Okay, do you not just feel like there's jealousy going on between Trump and Elon? Just you can't get one over on me, no. And so they hear that. So the guys, know that everybody is supposed to bow down whenever the band plays. So when the band strikes up a tune, everybody's supposed to drop whatever they're doing and go onto this flat ground and kneel and bow down to this guy or to this statue. So this happens, but Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego don't do it. Now, I don't know where Daniel is. We never hear what's going on with Daniel. So we'll find out in heaven. We'll ask him, where were you on that? Because I don't think he bowed down, but he was somewhere.
Official duties.
Huh?
Off doing his official duties.
Maybe in the bathroom.
Official duties.
Yep, there you go. So in verse 12 it says, but there are some, and so they plan this. Okay, you can just hear it. Let's plan this so that if somebody doesn't do it, they've got to be thrown into the fiery furnace. Okay, they planned all this. This is not just happenstance that if you don't do it, you're just going to get off scot-free. This was all calculated planning to get these guys. Because here are these Jewish people coming over and being over them. You just don't let the foreigners come in and do this to you. And so anyway, so the plan is in place. They think they've got it. And you're going to see this in more times than once, that they think they've got it all. They think I've got the tiger by the tail. And so they see that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not bowing down, and so they run to the king. They can't wait to tell him. Guess what? Those three guys? You passed the law that they had to bow down, and if they don't bow down, what did you say is going to happen, O king? They got to go in the fiery furnace. Oh yeah, I did say that, didn't I? I think it was your idea, but okay, yeah, it was. Yeah, I got to do that. Okay, so they were brought before. Now remember, he likes these guys. So in my mind, I really think he's saying, yeah, I think you did say that. In my back of his mind, I really do think that's what went on. So anyway, so I love that they were just, didn't defend themselves. Back to the attitude. It wasn't a haughty attitude. It wasn't anything but I know my God will bring this through. If he doesn't, it's okay. So even if he does not want to, it says in verse 18, O king, But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Now, what does Exodus 23 through 5 say? Anybody have a fast clue of what's in Exodus 20? It would be the 10 Commandments. So what could possibly be in 3 to 5 that would apply to this?
No, I don't know.
Yep. Do not. Yep. I'm just going to go
False
there.
gods.
Yep. So Exodus 20, I'll do it there real fast. 3 through 5. You shall have no other gods before me. So we're not just talking one 10 commandment here. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. Number 3, you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. 3 commandments right there. So see why this was built into them to not want to bow down to this idol. So they were bent that they were not going to do it. Verse 19, but Nebuchadnezzar was furious and his attitude toward them changed. So here is where we see the attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing fire. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the fire. The king's command was so urgent that the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers. So they were thrown in, and they didn't die, but the soldiers who threw them in died. And yet the king looks in and he sees, he's looking, and it's a little hole. The furnace is all enclosed. You know, the pictures when you're looking in Sunday school, you're seeing the whole thing. But it's a little peephole that he's looking into. And he looks in this peephole and he says, it's like an adobo. You know what adobo is? Like if you ever go to the Southwest, it's, I don't know, how would you describe it? Because she doesn't know what adobo is.
Kind of like a hut.
A hut, it's
Small hut.
small hut, but it's made of clay.
Stone or what is it?
Stone,
Yeah,
clay.
like the orange stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has a little hole. So the king looks in the hole and he sees a 4th man walking. As the songs all say, sees the 4th man walking. He says it looks like a son of a god. And so he's amazed at this and you know, that he even realizes that this is a god in there with them. And he doesn't see, he even sees that their ties on their hands are no more. They don't even have ties on anymore. And so, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They said, certainly, O king. Well, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th man looks like the son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out. Isn't that interesting that he tells them to come out? So they came out. And all the other people crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Well, Nebuchadnezzar praises the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. So, on verse 29, therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. So this is another time that Nebuchadnezzar sees the God of Israel and his mighty works. Now, we don't know how long it is between chapter 3 and chapter 4, but King Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. This one's a dream of a tree. We don't necessarily hear as much about this particular dream as we do the other two stories, but Nebuchadnezzar has been married to a beautiful princess who has been up from the mountains of Persia, or Iraq, which is Tehran right now. Well, she really missed the trees, and she missed the mountain, and she missed the wild animals. Figure that one out. But she actually cried herself to sleep at night. And the king would say, "Oh, why are you crying? There's no crying in Babylon." And she would say, "I miss trees. I miss the mountains. Remember, this is flat as pancake. I miss the wild animals." So what does a good king do that can do anything? He builds her a mountain. He builds her trees, and he builds her a zoo on top of the mountain with wild animals. It becomes one of the 7 wonders of the world. We don't ever hear that, do we? Because it's not in the Bible, but it's true. Well, now the dream happens, so we got to keep that in mind, okay? So, verse 4, I was at my home in my palace, contented and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in my bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. So I commanded it, all the wise men of Babylon. Now, why didn't he just go straight for Daniel? I don't know. But he went for those crazy wise men again. And, of course, they couldn't do a thing. They couldn't interpret anything. So finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of holy gods is in him. I said, Belshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree was large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful and fruit abundant, and he goes on and he talks about the tree. And so, let's see, where should I go to? So Daniel in 19 then starts to interpret it. And he says in verse 19, my Lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, you are the tree. You become great and strong. Remember, he's the great golden head up here. Your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. You, O king, saw a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field. This is the interpretation. I'm down to 25. You will be driven away from the people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdom of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. So see, this is where we come back to of that. So this is exactly what happens. A year later, doesn't happen. See, we always think, God, we're going to pray and something's going to happen, or some word of prophecy comes and we think it's going to happen tomorrow. But God's timing is not our timing. Even for bad things, we think for good things it should happen tomorrow. Even for bad things. But verse 29, 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? Well, the words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you.
You will be driven away from people, and you will live with wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign. So he loses his sanity. In verse 33, his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. And so for 7 years, he goes nuts. And he lives up in that zoo with all the wild animals. Isn't that crazy? So it says in 36, at that time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. So he will be in heaven. We will get to meet King Nebuchadnezzar. So I believe that Daniel was there for such a time as that. So, I think that God said, in Daniel's heart, stay.
Yeah.
Yep. He might not have, bloom where you're planted. That, I know that's a secular phrase, but I really think, because my heart always wants to just save everybody, but I can't. And so I just remember, just bloom wherever I'm at. That's who am I next to? That's who I'm supposed to reach. Because my personality just thinks, I gotta reach everybody. And I can't, but that's how I'm built. So I just gotta remember, bloom where I'm planted. Now remember I told you that Daniel is called Belteshazzar, right? Okay. Confusing when you get to chapter 5, because now we have King Belshazzar. Okay? This is King Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, son, nobody really knows. It's not very, very clear. So don't mistake King Belshazzar as Belteshazzar. Very confusing. I had to go back and okay, who is who? So it's the next, so now King Nebuchadnezzar has now died. We've got to chapter 5. So I wrote in my Bible, King Nebuchadnezzar has died, because I don't want to get confused when I go back in 2 years and read this again. So now King Belshazzar he's the king, and now I'm going to rack your brain, and we're going to go back into our mind of Kings, to 2 Kings again. Let's see here. Do you remember anything about a get well card?
A what?
A get well card. Those of you who have been here almost every week, a king back in 2 Kings, and he got a get well card. Anybody remember that? His name was King Hezekiah. He was sick, and he asked God to give him more time. And so God gave him 15 more years, and he shouldn't have, because he had 2 more sons, and they ended up being rotten sons. But, so King Hezekiah, he was so excited because the king of Babylon sent a couple guys as a get well card to say, we just want to say, get well.
Yeah.
And so Hezekiah, the king, gave him a tour. Exactly. Okay, ringing a bell now. This is. So, because we've talked about this numerous times. So remember that name. He's the one that received the get well card from King Nebuchadnezzar. So he gave a tour and showed these guys from Babylon all the things in the temple. All the things that were worth all kinds of things. The goblets in the temple, all the important things. And all of a sudden, the next morning, he got a tap on the shoulder from What prophet? Isaiah. Isaiah. It's the first time we hear about Isaiah in the Bible. Isaiah taps him on the shoulder and said, "Who are those guys?" "Oh, those guys just brought me a get well card. They just wanted to just say, I hope you're feeling better." So, and he says, "Well, what did you show them?" "Well, I just showed them around the temple. I showed them all the things. I opened all the safes, and I showed them everything, all the money and all the fun things that we have here." And Isaiah said, "Oh, not good." Well, chapter 5, it comes back to bite somebody. So King Belshazzar gives a great banquet. So what happens? King Belshazzar brings out all those goblets and has an orgy with a bunch of people. Do you think that goes over well with God? No, not at all. So while they were drinking the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. And suddenly, look at verse 5. Suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way. The king called out for the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners to be brought, and said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they couldn't read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. "O king, live forever," she said. "Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. King Nebuchadnezzar, your father," oh, there we go. It says it. Well, these crazy guys who told me that they didn't know who it was, we're going to just highlight that right there. "Your father, the king, I say, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. This man Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means." So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought him from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. The wise men and enchanters were brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. Now I have heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck and be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and your rewards to somebody else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. O king, the most high God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the peoples and nations and men of every nation dreaded and feared him." And then he kind of goes on down, but here, let's just jump down to 22. "But you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself." Because all before that, he kind of goes into what happened to him, but how King Nebuchadnezzar came to God, I should say. "But you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praise the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see, hear, or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, Tekel, Parsin. This is what these words mean. Mene means God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Peres, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. You can see that on that statue back there, right? Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, gold chain, yada yada. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. When you mess around, God takes care of it that time immediately. So it was that very night he lost the kingdom and lost his life. So that very night, Persia got into the city of Babylon. Babylon was taken over and was finished, but it will pop back up in the last books of the Bible again. Babylon will. Okay, last book we're going to talk about tonight, or the last chapter, is Daniel in the Lion's Den. Here's our other famous book. So, Darius liked Daniel, okay? So, another king, another emperor. The problem was a lot of anti-Semitism again. Mm-hmm. People are being forced once again to worship other gods, and people are forbidden to pray to any other god for 1 month. Okay, this is back to they're trying to get the Jews, okay? And but Daniel wouldn't listen. So in this chapter, I still believe that these are guys that are out to get Daniel. So they want to make these crazy rules. So they make the rule that you have to do this for 1 month. And I believe that they were out and they would see Daniel. Daniel would look, he would pray out his window looking towards Jerusalem. Okay? And probably just a symbolic thing. That's my home, you know? And so I just want to pray towards that way. I don't think it's like the Indian people that, you know, when they buy a house, they want their house to face east because that's the way they want to pray. And I could never find a house facing east. And they'd be like, that's okay, that's all right. They weren't that caring about it. They just wanted to try if they could. But let me tell you, it's hard to find a house facing east, except my house faces east in Roanoke. So, let's see, where should we start with this? Should I just tell the story? Daniel learns that the decree had been published, that he had to, I want to just start somewhere in here. The king gave the order. Let's start at 13. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah. Remember, they always bring that back. How long has Daniel been here? Yeah. But he's got to bring it up. He's one of those Jews. One of those exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went in as a group to the king and said to him, Remember, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. You know they put that in there. You know, when they came and said that, they're like, now you got to make this so that nobody can change this. Nothing nobody can do. They made this ironclad, okay? 16, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. You know, what king says that? You know, I hope your God rescues you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. He could not sleep. This is a man who loves his employee. At the first light, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. I can just hear him. "Get in here and get my Daniel out of this den." And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. And what's so interesting is a lot of secular scholars out there say, "Oh, I bet those lions had been fed so much they just weren't hungry." But read on. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children.
Oh, wow.
And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land, "May you prosper greatly." And so I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. Not Daniel, the God of Daniel. So, but the problem is, a king can't tell anybody who to worship and have it come from their heart. That's the sad part. He can say, "I want you to worship," but it's got to come from the people's heart. So that's why, those countries didn't end up being Christian nations. But I hope that I hope you learned some things that you didn't know before, because so many of us haven't read these books. We're like, "Oh yeah, I know them because I learned them in Sunday school." But there's a lot of little things in here that, I think are some goals of nuggets of gold. And so.
See, mine's got the picture.
Oh, he did have a beard. Oh, his clothes were long. It would have been easier. I hadn't thought about that.
What does it look like? Oh,
I didn't have that picture. That's a good one.
Uh-huh.
That was a good one. So.